Tonight, the Volkswagen Group has ended negotiations with the most powerful union in Europe, IG Metall. The negotiations were ended at 12 p.m. at night. No deal was struck. Unions threatened the Volkswagen Group with further strike actions. Volkswagen is demanding a 10% decrease in salary for all of its 120,000 workers in Germany. It's saying it needs to shut down either 2 or 3 factories at a minimum. Unions say none of that will happen. Unions say the only deal that they will accept is no increase in salaries this year. However, the Volkswagen Group now have $240 billion in debt, making them the second most indebted company in the world. All of this is going to end very, very badly. Hello, my friends. Welcome to the channel. I'm Sam Evans. You're watching The Electric Viking. It's great to have you with us. $240 billion. Now, I don't believe that includes Volkswagen's planned investment of more than $5 billion into Rivian. But that's a staggering amount of debt on Volkswagen's books. And that makes it one of the most indebted companies in the history of the planet. But if you think that's the only trouble brewing at Volkswagen, well, buckle up. Volkswagen's profits have hit a major speed bump. They are down 20% in the first 9 months of 2024 compared to last year. That means their profits are at their lowest level in who knows how long. A very long time. Now Volkswagen is weighing a drastic move, shutting down 3 factories in Germany. If that happens, tens of thousands of jobs will be lost, directly, indirectly, potentially more than 100,000. That's a gut punch for Volkswagen and for Germany. I mean, Germany, they are so very reliant on the automotive industry for everything, for jobs, for production, for engineering, for manufacturing. What's driving this crisis? Well, lots of things. In fact, those numbers I just presented to you are even worse than what they sounded, because Volkswagen actually reported a staggering 42% fall in quarterly profits over the past 3 months. They are now grappling with the kind of financial crisis that the company itself has likened to a building on fire. In fact, its CFO said, the building of the group is on fire. This crisis extends beyond a single profit report. Volkswagen Group's struggles represent challenges facing legacy automakers as they transition into an entirely new world. A very competitive industry, which is now being dominated by Chinese manufacturers. The founder of Solar Clean, Andrew Wetton, says that Volkswagen's third quarter results reveal operating profits have dwindled to only $2.86 billion, out of an overall revenue of $78.5 billion. That's a 3.6% operating margin. That's razor thin, down from an already low 3.4% in the previous year. Now, is this cause for alarm? Absolutely. By comparison, Tesla, a major competitor with significant production and scaling advantages, maintains an operating margin of around 16%. But it's even worse than it sounds, because Volkswagen makes a loss on every electric car it sells. Considering the fact that most experts believe that, 2026 will be the tipping point, considering the decline in battery pack prices they've come down by a staggering 23% this year, and at the cell level by 51%. Even Bloomberg themselves are now saying that, you're finished if you can't manufacture EVs at competitive prices within the next 2 years. Volkswagen's issues lie in their high fixed costs. Labor in Germany is extremely expensive. It costs the Volkswagen Group around 7,000 euros in labor per car. But Chinese manufacturers, it costs them less than 2,000. Fixed costs at Volkswagen are a major problem. And that means that they can't mass manufacture electric cars and make a profit. The company has spent billions developing EVs and new technology to catch up with competitors, but the revenue has fallen badly. What makes things worse? Porsche, a premium brand under the Volkswagen umbrella, saw profits fall over 42%. High-end brands like Porsche maintain usually good profit margins that can support the broader group. With Porsche, in free fall, more than 40 dealerships are closing in China. The entire Volkswagen Group is under immense pressure. Debt and production slowdowns are a huge problem, and this weight is immense. I mean, when you have $240 billion worth of debt, you've got some pretty big debt repayments, right? One of the most concerning aspects of the Volkswagen Group's financial situation is its huge debt and its plan for future investments. I mean, the Volkswagen Group says it needs to invest $200 billion in new facilities, on ramping production, on changing production lines to newer models, into building new electric car platforms. That's got to mean they'd have, $440 billion in debt, assuming they don't incur any other debts. Debt of this scale is a double-edged sword, though. While it funds innovation, it increases the company's financial obligations in a time when revenues are falling. I mean, to be honest, think about this. If you were a bank today, would you want to give Volkswagen Group this much money? Would you think that would be a big brisk? I think so. Unlike financial debt that may support revenue-generating assets, a portion of Volkswagen's debt is bad debt or non-performing investments that are unlikely to yield returns. Now, while it's true that of that $240 billion in debt, a significant portion is financial debt, which is actually not necessarily a bad thing. Actually, most of it is bad debt. Beyond the immediate financial strain, Volkswagen's debt load and operating margins make it very difficult to keep up with its production goals. Sales are expected to decline by 1 million vehicles this year and decline by a further 1 million next year. Recently, the company announced a series of factory closures, including its plant in Belgium. After failing to find a buyer, it has sold one of its major factories in China. And with these closures and potential cuts to wages affecting over 140,000 employees, Volkswagen faces a pretty difficult battle to reduce production costs in the short term. I mean, that's why it's saying to unions now, we have to cut costs immediately. There is no ability for the Volkswagen Group to negotiate on this because banks don't negotiate. When they demand their repayments, they don't say, we'll negotiate on that with you, Volkswagen. There's no negotiating with debt repayments. Volkswagen has big plans to transform its lineup into primarily electric models. It said today that it has this reasons why it believes the entire market is going to go electric. That was a direct quote from a Volkswagen executive within the past 24 hours. However, investments to fund this shift are putting a huge strain on its current finances. Volkswagen invested around $5 billion in Rivian, an American EV startup. It invested into Xpeng recently as well, and it has invested into new factories dedicated to producing electric vehicles under the Scout brand. But given Volkswagen's current financial troubles, questions remain about whether the company can even afford to bring these vehicles out in 2027. Do they have the cash? Do they have the money? Who's going to give them the money? Financial institutions are now going, hang a minute, this is pretty risky. That's what happened to Nissan. Nissan has huge debt balloon repayments due over the next 12 months, and the company needs an outside investor to bail them out so they can pay them. Despite the EV push, competitors like BYD in China are undercutting prices to gain market share, and they have better products, sometimes selling vehicles below production costs. And the Volkswagen Group can't really do this. With this kind of debt, you can't do what the Chinese are doing. BYD and Tesla have very little debt. They can afford, if they want to sell below cost. The Volkswagen Group can do that for a very small number of vehicles, but not for the majority of cars that it sells. It's just a physical impossibility. As local competitors crowd the market, especially in China, Volkswagen's electric offerings face a very difficult battle against affordable and better quality alternatives. No one in China thinks, yeah, you know what? Volkswagen EVs are the bee's knees. I want one of those. With Tesla's efficiency in manufacturing, it takes Volkswagen 3 times as long to produce a single vehicle. That is information coming from the former CEO of the company, who was fired last year after saying the company needed to cut costs, needed to reduce staff numbers, and needed to build more EVs. That means costs are much higher for Volkswagen as a group than its direct rivals. Europe's car market has shrunk by around 2 million vehicles since the pandemic, with about 500,000 fewer units sold annually by Volkswagen, and probably 1 million less this year. This downturn shows the mounting competition, not just from domestic players like Tesla, but also Chinese manufacturers who are introducing competitively priced EVs to European customers. Andrew Wetton says that China, historically a high growth region for Volkswagen, has become another pain point. Traditionally, Volkswagen generated half of its profits from Chinese sales, but local automakers in China have begun offering cheaper models, making it really hard for Volkswagen to hold its share of the market, and it is losing it. It's losing profits, it's losing margins, and it's losing sales. Contrary to common narratives, Chinese auto sales are actually up 7% this year compared to last year. In fact, more than 30 million cars will be sold in China this year. That dispels the idea, says Andrew, that Volkswagen's challenges are solely due to a weaker Chinese economy. That's a myth being perpetuated by the media that want you to believe, don't worry, China's on its side, it's having its own problems. That's what this is about. This has got nothing to do with the Volkswagen Group. It's just because China's in a recession. Well, actually, its auto sales are most certainly not. The reality is that Volkswagen is losing ground in China due to agile, low-cost competitors. The high cost of meeting US emission standards or global emission standards are affecting the company as well. Volkswagen has disclosed that it may struggle to meet CO2 emissions targets set by the European Union, which could lead to billions of dollars in fines if not addressed. Alternatively, it will have to buy carbon credits from Tesla, who will make more than $2 billion on the sale of carbon credits this year to other automakers who can't meet emission standards. To meet these standards without exceeding their carbon cap, Volkswagen will need to pool their fleet with a compliant manufacturer, such as Tesla or BYD. This essentially means purchasing carbon credits, likely from Tesla, which will cost the company hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars annually, potentially even more than that. So what's next for Volkswagen? Well, Andrew says that the Volkswagen Group's CFO has publicly stated the company is in urgent need of cost-cutting measures. However, Labour unions in Germany are pushing back against this. They are saying this is completely unacceptable, and they have a lot of power. They say that factory closures are completely unacceptable. They will not accept that either. And potential layoffs, they will not accept this. The IG Metall Union are saying Volkswagen have to guarantee all 130,000 jobs. They are not allowed to fire anyone. With an aging workforce, a very expensive workforce, complex factory processes, and significant debts, enormous debts, Volkswagen faces a huge dilemma. They have to cut costs, but how do they do this? They can't. There is enormous pressure to remain competitive, and their workforce is very resistant to change. Now, if you're German, I'm sorry, but Germans don't really like change all that much. They can be quite stubborn. Volkswagen has predicted that its operating margin will jump to 5.6% in 2026, but analysts believe this is complete bullshit. There is no way, they believe, for Volkswagen to do this. What is it? Tell us, Volkswagen Group, what are you going to do in order to double your operating margin in 2026? Well, the Volkswagen Group really don't have an answer for that. Analysts and critics say that given the company's current margin of only 3.5% and lack of any real pathway to growth in profitability, that is extremely unlikely. With many European countries moving towards stricter emission standards and an increasingly competitive global EV market, which is dominated by Chinese companies, Tesla, Volkswagen's path forward is, well, nobody knows. The CFO says the company is on fire. And as you can see, that is actually true. The magnitude of Volkswagen's debt and the narrow profit margins highlight just how precarious the company's position truly is. Volkswagen is undoubtedly one of the most established automakers in the world, but that doesn't stand for much these days. Think about it. Internal combustion engine factories are not worthless, but not far off it. Hyundai, one of the biggest makers of vehicles in the world built a factory in China only a couple of years ago. It cost them 1.4 billion. They end up selling it for just over 200 million. Without enormous bailouts and assistance from the German government, the company will struggle to stay afloat and pay off its enormous debts. The truth is, between now and 2030, it is most likely the Volkswagen Group's car sales will fall by a minimum of 50%. No one really sees Volkswagen as being innovative. And when it comes to electric cars, when it comes to software, there's been so many problems that the group is going to struggle to sell vehicles to wary consumers who are like, well, hang on a minute, Dieselgate scandal, EV massive problems, software problems. Why would we buy an overpriced vehicle from you when your competition is selling vehicles that are cheaper, better, and have a longer range? Some analysts say that Volkswagen may require a huge government bailout within the next 5 years if it is continue competing on a global scale. Others say it could be much worse than that. Ultimately, Volkswagen's current struggles are emblematic of the broader challenges facing legacy automakers in a world that is rapidly shifting toward electric, autonomous, and efficient electric cars. The future is uncertain. We can't say for sure that the Volkswagen Group will go bankrupt, but one thing is very clear. Volkswagen has to adapt, but there's no clear and obvious pathway for that to even happen. It risks becoming a cautionary tale of what happens when tradition hinders transformation. It risks becoming another BlackBerry, another Nokia, or another Kodak.